A series of massive wildfires across Northern California.
Please drive, just please drive. I'm trying.
Illustrating a deadly new reality.
We've seen fire tornadoes before in our career, but the level at which this was like an F4 tornado.
For firefighters, a need for new tactics and new understandings.
We are changing tactics and strategy and putting a lot more resources ahead of these fires.
And for residents, a new urgency to prepare.
People need to know you may not get what you need immediately, and if you're not getting something, then you need to act on your own.
Especially here.
Fires are becoming much more explosive.
Especially now.
And we're seeing a 100,000 acre fire, unfortunately, is the normal fire for us.
Tonight, a KCRA 3 News special, California's Season of Fire, with KCRA 3's Edie Lambert and Chief Meteorologist Mark Finan.
Good evening from Paradise, a town that was thriving at this time last year. In one November morning, the Camp Fire swept through here, leveling nearly the entire community.
This used to be a neighborhood. The homes here among the thousands that were lost, and even worse, all the people that were killed on that day as the fire swept through town.
Firefighters are now changing their tactics. Scientists are developing new ways to predict the weather, and people are realizing in a situation like what happened here, their lives are in their own hands. They have to be ready. And even before this disaster, we'd seen that wildfire behavior is changing.
Firefighters used to call them career fires. Fires so big, so intense, so destructive.
Hey, bump the pressure!
They might only see one of them in their careers.
You're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes. This is absolutely devastation.
This is another home that is going up in flames.
For some, this fire in the Oakland Hills in 1991 was that legacy. For others, it is this fire that raged through South Lake Tahoe in 2007, the Angora Fire.
Okay, because it's mandatory to get people out of here.
But for CAL FIRE firefighters, these past 2 years have shown them one thing. Those fires spanning thousands of acres, burning hundreds or thousands of homes.
Come on. Watch out, watch out!
Injuring, even killing people in their path are no longer the exception. There will be no more career fires. Those fires are happening every year.
We no longer say the new normal, we are in the normal. And we're seeing a 100,000 acre fire, unfortunately, is the normal fire for us. That used to be unheard of.
CAL FIRE Chief Mike Moeller says that new normal really started about 2 years ago. In a scene reminiscent of Oakland Hills, neighborhoods in the city of Santa Rosa were burning.
The Tubbs fire, that jumped a 6-lane freeway, the 101 freeway. The community of Coffee Park, Santa Rosa, when you start seeing commercial buildings, you know, the Walmart burned down, your local pizza store, the Starbucks, when you see those things burning, that's the type of conditions we are in. And what that happens is when you have major structures involved, it's going to continue to carry that fire, what we consider a conflagration. It may have started what we consider the normal wildland-urban interface or the brush up against the homes. Well, these type of weather patterns are carrying that way past that into urban settings.
Mark Ghilarducci, the director of the State Office of Emergency Services, watched as that late-season fire grew. It was October. In years past, Northern California would have seen rain, cooler temperatures, and the fire season winding down.
The director of CAL FIRE had called me in the middle of the night and said, look, this is, we're getting word from our guys on the ground. This is really going to, we need to put everything forward on this.
But prolonged drought led to the trees, the brush, the grass, and the weeds being dried out like kindling. An electrical system put in by a homeowner near the town of Calistoga sparked, and the dry grass went up in flames. That fire blew across the Napa County mountains and into the city of Santa Rosa.
It'll be a miracle if we have a house left when we get back.
Smoke detectors never even went off.
If my friend would have never woke me up, I probably would have been dead right now.
In less than a day, entire streets in Santa Rosa were reduced to ash.
What we saw in the city limits over the last not even 12, 14 hours is incredible.
Wiped out. And then I had steel roofs, and
Didn't matter. Didn't matter.
The pain on display and raw as people searched for their lost pets. When the smoke finally cleared over Santa Rosa, thousands of structures were destroyed, more than 30,000 acres scorched, and 22 people were dead. Yet the state of emergency hadn't ended, it just shifted.
Our capabilities here are really designed for being able to handle at least 2 catastrophic and 1 medium disaster in the state at any one time. And of course, that was the case in here. After we had the Tubbs fire, then we started breaking fires down south, and then we had the Thomas fire, and then of course it was followed shortly after by the mud flows in Montecito.
Suddenly, the state was moving from one disaster to another. By 2018, another one of those career fires.
You can see this fire is moving.
On July 23rd, a tire on a car failed and sparks from the rim hitting the road started a massive fire. The car fire near Reading, the likes of which no one had seen before.
We didn't know how to respond to that. We knew we were going to an emergency, but when that created, all bets were off. That spread fire for miles in every direction. Those are the kind of things we're seeing, and we have to be prepared because those weather patterns aren't going away.
It's almost like a battleground where you have to really be strategic on how you place and order resources, and that's really a big change from where we used to be.
Just 4 days into fighting the car fire, 2 wildfires broke out near Mendocino. Like Tubbs and Carr, the Mendocino complex fire was fueled by strong wind, dry, brittle grass and brush, and high temperatures.
The vegetation here hasn't been burned in a while, so it's like bacon grease. It just, once it gets going, it'll take off pretty good.
As flames in both Mendocino and Reading grew, many evacuated, but others refused. And as conditions got worse on the ground, saving residents stalled the firefighters' progress on the fire itself.
The men and women, the law enforcement officers, the firefighters, they were in there when that happened. They're in there trying to save people. In some cases, people who didn't leave when they were told to. And they're putting themselves in harm's way for those people. That's why we ask, leave when we ask you to leave.
When you stay in your structure, regardless of how prepared you are, you're really taking your life into your own hands. And remember, there may not be somebody there to come get you when your structure does become involved in fire.
One firefighter was killed fighting the Mendocino complex. It burned more acres than any other fire in California's recorded history.
If there is one overall factor driving wildfire behavior, it's the weather. Even before what happened here in Paradise, wildfire experts were taking notice.
What happened in the Tubbs fire, the Carr fire, and others only underscores the growing danger and the new reality.
Fires are becoming much more explosive, they're moving much faster, and they're having a much greater impact on communities.
And as we are now seeing across Northern California, that impact can be extreme.
There are instances where the weather that it creates actually will have its own lightning, so it can create its own wind.
That wind can be as destructive as the fire itself.
You see roofs ripped off houses. The fire didn't do that. The wind did.
I remember a discussion I was having with the Cal Fire director at the time that we were watching the way that weather was almost like a tornado had come through the subdivision.
At the Carr fire, that tornado analogy turned out to be frighteningly true.
We had an EF2. That's never, ever been on a fire. Have we ever experienced that? What we did is during the review, the accident investigation, we actually ordered meteorologists from Kansas to come out and look at this because this was completely out of the box.
We've seen fire-nados before in our career, but the level at which this was like an F4 tornado that was built around a fire.
And what was unique about the Carr fire is after the fire tornado, the fire was still burning.
Dr. Craig Clemens is with San Jose State University. He and his staff were part of the team investigating that fire tornado.
A large tornado like the Carr fire tornado with a EF3 signature and strength, that's probably rare. Okay. But rotating columns are very common. And so what are more common are fire whirls. So everyone gets excited about fire whirls, but they happen on basically every fire because all you need is rising motion and some wind shear, which occurs on every fire front, and you get a spinning fire whirl. But they're usually much smaller than something like the Carr fire.
The Carr fire would burn more than 200,000 acres and kill 8 people. 3 of them firefighters. The Mendocino complex fire would burn until November, watched over and eventually contained by firefighters. But any reprieve would be short-lived. Even after seeing so much destruction in Redding and in Santa Rosa, no one was prepared for what would happen next, what happened here in Paradise.
And Mark, both the scale and the speed of the devastation were unprecedented. Nearly all of the thousands of buildings burned and the lives lost were in the first few explosive hours.
Paradise Police 911.
We got a big fire.
Okay, where are you at?
I'm on Mole Road. It looks like it's by the river.
Okay,
It's in the barrel. It's huge.
Around 6:15 a.m., November 8th, winds started picking up outside of Pulga in Butte County. A PG&E crew reported a problem with the Caribou-Palermo transmission line. An insulator had separated from tower 27222, and a live high-voltage electrical wire broke free.
Last check, the fire over 1,000 acres. We'll have the latest for you coming up as we continue on this morning news. KPAY News Time is 8:42.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
This was the result.
Are they coming for us?
Come on.
Watch out, watch out. Yeah!
At first report, it was just 10 acres. By around 7 a.m., the fire, now called the Camp Fire, had reached the town of Concow. By 7:20, the Butte County Sheriff was evacuating Pulga. 8:30, the flames had entered the town of Paradise, causing frantic calls to 911.
I'm on the end of Dreyer Drive in Paradise on the West Branch. The fire has come over the top of Sawmill Peak. There are spot fires all over, and the wind is blowing like hell.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It's burning right here.
Paradise has one road in and out. There were thousands of people trying to escape the flames.
It's okay, Mama. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Please drive. Just please drive. I'm crying.
At the same time, firefighters were trying to get to the flames.
What we need to do is we're responding, we're getting into place. We actually have to bring engines in, make a plan, but realize that resources are coming, aircraft, ground troops. They may not be at your front door, but they are planning an attack exactly where your home is.
So in terms of an evacuation, you could be on your own.
There's no question. Absolutely, you could be on your own.
Optimal parking lot, let's go! Get out of your cars, let's go!
The roads were jammed. The fire burned in one direction and then another. The wind, the dry vegetation, all led to a fire that didn't behave like fires before.
A lot of those homes in the areas between Paradise, Concow, and Magalia, those were fires starting a mile ahead of what we would consider the fire front. So jumping miles, we're seeing that on all fires now because the receptive fuel beds and the type of winds that are carrying embers.
The power was down, and so were the cell towers. Most of them did not have backup generators.
Here's the reality. Technology is fabulous, but it does fail. And until we can get 100% reliability, when you plan for an emergency, you have to plan for the emergency that communication is going to fail. So you need backup. You need a hand-cranked or battery-operated radio.
A torrent of flames blew through Paradise, devastating the town. Smoke carried through Chico, south to Sacramento, and even into the Bay Area. 86 people were killed, some stuck in their cars trying to escape the flames. It is the deadliest fire in California history.
So in one of these major disasters, what would you tell people about what they can and cannot expect from emergency responders?
Well, I think you can expect that every emergency responder is going to do everything they possibly can to meet the needs and the requests that are coming at them. The expectation, to manage expectation, is that during these events, depending on the scope and scale, that may not be always possible. People need to know that in these events, you may not get what you need immediately. And if you're not getting something, then you need to act on your own.
In the meantime, for the people of Paradise, Santa Rosa, Redding, and other fire-ravaged communities, the cleanup, the rebuilding, and the recovery will continue for years to come.
Which brings us to where we are now, late August, heading into what has historically been the worst part of our fire season.
So next we'll explain what makes late summer and fall so dangerous, how those conditions can make a fire explode very quickly. The fire here in Paradise, a perfect example of that, as we continue with our special, California's Season of Fire.
As we're focusing on wildfires tonight, weather, of course, one of the most critical factors in deciding whether a fire will be manageable or burn out of control. So, Mark, let's talk about the really mild start to our season this year.
It has been a very quiet start to the fire season so far. A couple of things to keep in mind. One, we had one of the wettest Mays we have ever had. We were still seeing snow in the Sierra in the month of May, so that really helps. The other thing is it's been a relatively mild summer. We have seen some heat, some 100-degree days, but we haven't seen prolonged heat. That helps too. But maybe the biggest thing is we haven't seen any rounds of north winds just yet. You combine all of those together and it delays the critical part of the fire season.
Which we're heading into right now, late August. And you know, you just have to think the fire that came through here in Paradise was in November, when people used to think fire season was long over.
So there are two main factors we look at when we get into this part of year. One is the fuel moisture, how much water is in the plants. Once they dry out, a fire can grow very quickly. And the other one is north winds. The later in the year it gets, the more frequently we see those north winds. The north winds are dry and very, very gusty. When you combine those two things together, a small fire can grow into a big fire very quickly.
And Mark, that is exactly what we saw here in Paradise.
Well, Edie, that fire grew so quickly. It started around 6:30 in the morning, but we had strong winds at the surface. Back where the fire started, the winds were around 50 miles an hour, and then downwind, they were around 35 miles an hour. Then aloft, a couple of 100 feet off the ground, we saw winds that were steady, 40, 45 miles an hour. So the fire spread not only on the ground, but then it was leapfrogging. It was leaping a half mile, a mile out ahead of itself because of those strong winds aloft. So that fire that started early, it got into town before the dispatchers even knew it was here.
And because the weather is so critical in fighting wildfires, scientists are coming up with some innovative ways to predict a fire's path.
That's right, Edie. I went to the only lab in the country that is currently mapping the connection between fire and weather. After the break, we'll show you the research that's being done to make us all safer.
As fire behavior is changing, so is the science used to forecast conditions before and during a fire. And Mark spent time with the researchers who are leading this type of science.
And Edie, these are meteorologists that are trained to be on the front lines of fires so that they can actually monitor the conditions in real time. Their equipment can look into the smoke plumes so that they can see things that even the fire crews can't see.
This is the updraft here, the updraft core.
This is the only lab in the country to map out the connections between fire and weather. At San Jose State's Meteorology Department, Dr. Craig Clements runs the Fire Weather Lab.
Extreme fires that we're seeing are mostly weather driven, and so those are that's our focus in our research program.
The team is trained to be right on the fire lines.
Everyone in my lab maintains a red card certification, which is like a firefighter card. So we get firefighter trained, and we up that training renew that training every year in the spring.
One of their most powerful tools is what's called a mobile Doppler LiDAR. They drive it out to large fires, and they can actually peer into the smoke plume to see what our eyes can't.
LiDAR allows us to profile the atmosphere and measure the wind speeds directly above our location. We can also measure the plume height.
What's going on inside and around the smoke plume is critical to understanding fire behavior. Within the smoke plume, they have found eddies, small updrafts and downdrafts never seen before.
What you would see is you'd see these updrafts, but you also see these areas of downdrafts, and those are usually associated with ash fallout.
The LiDAR has also detected rotations that could be extremely dangerous for fire crews.
The winds are in opposite directions, very close together. That's a circulation that could lead to rotating columns or even a fire tornado or a generation of large fire whirls. So we can actually see that in real time, and that is a lookout situation for firefighters. So those data and those observations are really important for incident command.
The goal of this research is to create a database of fire weather and build a model to predict future fire behavior in real time.
These data that we're collecting will help develop new tools to save lives and property.
That data is also used to issue red flag warnings. But here's the thing. Do you know what those warnings mean?
And most people don't. And part of that has to do with the fact that we have not defined that very well in the past, but that's changing this year. We are going to change the way we show you red flag warnings in our forecast. So here's what a red flag warning should mean to you. Conditions are right for rapid fire spread. Extreme fire behavior is possible, and you should be ready to evacuate.
And by the time a fire is getting close to your home, you already have to be prepared.
And that is perhaps the biggest lesson from all of this. Be prepared. The frightening images from Paradise, Redding, Santa Rosa, and elsewhere underscore just how unpredictable wildfires can be.
Oh, God! The panicked cries of residents illustrating how quickly conditions and lives can change.
The warnings from firefighters and others that this is the new wildfire reality for Northern California, one we need to understand, accept, and plan for.
If there's one thing we've learned from the recent wildfires is that they can explode out of control very quickly. So it's up to all of us to take our own safety into our own hands.
And remember, as fires do break out, we will be working to bring you the most precise information available as quickly as possible to help you make those critical decisions. Meantime, thank you for joining us tonight, and for all of us at KCRA 3, we wish you a safe fire season.